Welcome. We're back with another episode of Your Will podcast. And today I have an artist coming in close to home, close to Montreal and Quebec, where we inhabit. I have Shaina Hayes coming in from. Are you in Montreal today, Shaina?
I am in Montreal, yes.
Excellent. Well, welcome to our humble little podcast here. I'm always happy when I get some Canadian guests, and now Quebec guests. We're getting even closer to my heart. And I've been listening to your records quite a bit, and I'm really happy that you took me up on this invite and that we get a chance to kind of share a little bit of what you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Equally, I'm realizing I've only done podcast interviews with interviewers from outside of Canada as well. So here we go.
Well, let's see what happens here. So, Shanna, I always like to kind of talk about your starting off stories. Like, when did music really start to become present in your life? And, like, do you remember those early moments of when music was like, okay, this is me. I got to do this?
Yeah, I guess mine is a really well, I guess everyone's story is unique, but mine's a bit funny because I just really started doing music. I've rolled into my 30s now, and I didn't release my first album until I was into my 30s, and I spent all of my 20s farming. I studied agriculture in university, but also had grown up on a farm, and went on after university to work for other farms, and that's what I had been doing for most of my life. But I did at cégep level, which is a thing I can say because this is a podcast based in Quebec.
The unknown college level,
Yeah.
right after high school. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did a double deck in cégep, music and science. And having grown up in a really, really small town in the Gaspésie on the east coast of Quebec, I did not have any musical training before I went to study jazz voice at the cégep level in Montreal, and also, similarly didn't have much experience seeing live music or anything like that. So all that to say, I left the Gaspé at 16, came to Montreal, studied music, did that for a year and a half, and then essentially ran away from music with my tail tucked between my legs because I was so intimidated by it. And made the turn towards farming and did that, as I said, for most of my 20s. And then I guess during pandemic times, I found myself with free time in the winters as I would, settle into my farm schedule that was vegetables. So it was very seasonal and very much spring, summer, fall. It would leave me my winters, and yeah, I started dabbling back in music and recorded an album just kind of leading into the pandemic, and then released it during the pandemic. And somehow it has taken root and taken flight, and I have run out of free moments for farming, and am now just doing full-time music. So it's a bit of an odd story, I guess. Like, yeah, going back to my initial kind of desire to do music at that young age, my family loves music, and my parents, always had kitchen parties and things like that going on. I have a lot of memories of having to fall asleep in my bed as a young child when there's just so much noise and music coming from the kitchen because my parents have their friends over. So that's sort of the relationship that I had with it at a young age. Just very appreciative. No one was a professional musician.
What would they play? Like, what style of music? Because I know the Gaspésie does have its traditional roots, in folk, and like what would happen in those nights that you got to kind of listen to and have an eyesight, like an eye on the wall?
Well, it was definitely more. I think my folks were. My mom was kind of a back to the land hippie of that era. My dad was born in the Gaspé, but my mom is from Saskatchewan. And so that was the pocket. So it wasn't necessarily like the country or the like folk traditional fiddle tunes that I suppose you would think come from that area. It was more the like rock and folk of the era. So, like a lot of the, you know, Fleetwood Mac and I suppose like the Eagles and the Beatles and whatever sing-along songs you could play on a guitar with maximum six chords in your repertoire. That's what was coming out of the kitchen.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
yeah.
Interesting. I want to rewind a little bit. You mentioned that you went to study music, um, and that you fled music. Can you can you share a little bit about that backstory? Like what intimidated you about it at that time when you were first starting in you said university or was it CEGEP? Like
That was
after
CEGEP.
okay.
Yeah, I guess I can just re-clarify. I did a double major of music and science at the CEGEP level, and then made the turn towards science and went on to study agricultural and environmental sciences at university level. Went on to start a farm, and then somehow found my
Right.
way back to music. But yeah, so I
So
think
you
at the
had those
time,
two options in front of you. It was like music and
hmm
the sciences were right there in a
hmm
collision course, I guess, right? Which one were you going to choose? Which one are you going to choose?
hmm yeah, totally. And so yeah, at the time, like I said, I like growing up in the Gaspé and especially growing up Anglophone in the Gaspé, it was a very isolated upbringing.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of live music. There certainly wasn't access to any training as an English speaker. And I got in on the audition for CEGEP, but I didn't have any of the theory or ear training that was
Mm,
required. And so I kind of from the second I got there had started doing these remedial courses, which was just sort of the tone of the rest of that education for me, is that I was just frantically trying to keep up with my peers, many of
right.
whom had had private lessons their whole childhood, and who a thing I often say um, is that for them, I think to some degree they would have seen the path towards a career in music, but for me, that was not something I had ever seen. I couldn't really visualize it. So even going in to study music, I was oblivious to what that would translate to should I decide to pursue it.
Right.
So I think in addition to feeling like I was always behind and wasn't as good at my craft as my peers,
Mm,
it was also that I couldn't see the path moving forward. I didn't have the
mm,
experience to know what it would look like. And farming obviously was a path that was well illuminated for me at that point. There was
right.
a lot of comfort and familiarity in it. And yeah, I think the when I went to study music at that level, it was in jazz,
Mm,
which I certainly had zero experience with up till that point,
mhm,
which meant even just the studies themselves, as informative informative as it was, and important as it is to learn jazz because of the kind of like theoretical and historical impact of that genre
mhm,
on what is now pop and what is more what I play now.
mhm,
It was just so far from, I guess, the music I liked to do. So I think the academia of it, the intellectualness of it, the competitiveness of the people around me, and the lack of visibility of a path moving forward for me made it so that my interest kind of dissolved, and
mm,
what music meant to me became very unclear and
right.
not necessarily, I guess, desirable at
Okay.
that point. So
Right. Right.
yeah.
So what so you went to farming and you did that you said for into your 20s.
Mhm.
And then pandemic, yes, hits. What sparked you to say, I'm going to lighten up that part of me that I put
Mhm.
aside or I pushed it aside for a while? What was what were the
Mhm.
moments that started to make you realize that I want to rekindle that or
It was very gradual and I think quite beautiful. I often, when I am explaining that this has been my trajectory, that I went from farming to music,
Mhm.
people are like, "Oh, wow." I guess like often people will be like, "Congratulations for taking such a 180 turn in your career," but they really and truly one led into the other in
Mm,
many, many ways that I'm still kind of um, deciphering. But I think on a creativity level and on a desire level, I think the farming, as I said, when I turned towards it, it was like the familiarity that drew me to it, but also the fact that it was in my mind not creative. It was an endeavor or like a career prospect that was manual labor based, and there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of
Yeah.
science brain that goes into farming. At a glance, it would seem completely opposite to music, but for me, it became clear once I started my own farm and was, engaging in that all the time. Yeah, it became clear that for me, it is actually deeply creative, and the satisfaction that I get from it does come from, facilitating the creation of this thing, be it the physically the landscaping of it, the beauty of the
Mhm.
farm itself, but also
Mhm.
the type of farming that I do is vegetable baskets. So the baskets themselves are quite beautiful. The connections you're making with the community are beautiful. And I think as I gained confidence in farming and my ability to farm and my ability to create this thing year after year, you know,
Mhm.
um, it it reawakened, or I guess it strengthened my desire to just be creating beautiful things all the time. And so
Yeah.
I found myself in the winter when the farm wasn't there, just kind of messing around on the guitar and dabbling and trying to formulate beautiful things as much as I could. And um, yeah, so it really feels like one led into the other in that way. And when I
Mhm.
released the first album, it certainly wasn't because I wanted to walk away from farming. It was just because I had the songs and I was in a place to release them, and we liked the songs, so
Right.
we
Right.
put them out. So
Do you
yeah, very.
remember like the first song to Coax a Waltz, right? It was your first release in 2022.
Mhm.
Um, what were the songs that you have on that record? Like, what's the song that kind of started convincing you, like, I got something here. This is, I like, I like the way it feels. I like the way I deliver it. Do you remember like a couple of those songs that kind of reinvigorated that musical spirit inside you?
So it was actually Hollow, the song Hollow, that we had recorded. I think actually like 2018. So that was just like randomly we had record. I say we, that's myself, my partner Francis Ledoux,
Mm-hmm.
who conveniently has like a recording studio in the basement of our apartment, and our other co-producer slash guitarist David Marchand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that song, I like. In truth, there was like a pending grant situation, and we had to just produce a song. We had to make a song really quickly, and that was literally the only song I had ever finished writing, and we just did it, submitted it for the grant, whatever. And then we're like, yeah, we like this. I hadn't worked with Frank before. I hadn't worked with Dave before. And then I was like, oh, well, I have a couple other songs maybe we could try. And we recorded a couple more. Um, and yeah, just that, having that team with me and having them believe in it and having them say, this stuff is pretty good. Like you should keep trying. And then
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think, yeah, we had 4 or 5 songs. I applied for a grant, got the grant, and was like, okay, here we go. Recorded 5 more and then put the album out. So, it's thanks to these folks. It's also thanks to the generous grants programs we have here in
Mm-hmm.
Canada for the arts,
Absolutely.
for
Absolutely.
hearing this music from this completely unestablished artist,
Mm.
and deciding to give them a chance. In hindsight, am like, why did they do that? But obviously, it has worked out to this point.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's
all the
amazing.
stars were kind of aligned. Yeah.
And Shannon, tell me a little bit about your music process. Like, how do you approach writing a song nowadays?
Hmm.
What's your process for songwriting?
So it's definitely changed a lot, and it's something I'm giving lots of thought to, because as I've had, like I said, to move from farming into music, um, it's I have more time. I have more time
Mm-hmm.
to write songs, and I've never had time to write songs. It's always been like essentially what was happening when I was dedicating this sliver of my winters just to music was that those songs were pretty much written in the summer in the cracks of time between my work days, but then we would, stretch them out and record them and refine them in the winter. But the writing really, up until now, has all taken place in the cracks of the rest of my life, and that works. But when you're now making this your career and you do need to make songs, it's different. You're setting aside whole chunks of time,
Right.
which is proving to be not as intuitive for me. So,
Mm.
but yeah, what it would look like as I was writing them in these cracks is, just messing around on the guitar. Either I would find like some chord changes that I liked or a melody that I was into, and usually it would happen that I would kind of write this little kind of just finished chunk of a song, like right up
Mm.
to the lyrics as well. It would be
Okay.
just like either one little piece of the verse or one little piece of the chorus. And once I had this sort of little pearl that I quite liked, I'll
Mm.
then expand it out, finish the sections, and perhaps the form with regards to the chords and melody, and then I'll come back after and do the lyrics
Mm.
separately, just
Okay.
because it's not always the same thing, but I like to give the lyrics a separate exercise, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
So that's how it's been up until now. But
Mm.
it's changing, and I am open to that. But I'm having to kind of analyze the way it's been happening up until this point and figure out, okay, how do I implement that now that this is full time?
Right. Right. Um, and your latest record that just came out, what, a week ago or so?
Week and a day.
Kindergarten Heart. Tell me
Yes.
a little bit about how that record came to be. So this is your second full length EP. I mean, I've listened to it. It's really beautiful. I love
Thank
the
you.
variety and the feel of hope, and it connects me to nature. Like, I'm a nature guy as well. I love my country home.
hmm
um, what was the beginning threads of this record being released a week ago?
So I think kind of going back, I guess, how Hollow, my first song, Hollow, on the first record, really kind of opened these gates for me to create and record the rest of that album.
Mm.
Creating that album opened the gates for the songs that are now on Kindergarten Heart. It really was like floodgates. Like once that door had been opened, the songs just poured out. So in truth, a lot of these songs were arising even before To Coax a Waltz had come out, as far as the writing level. So that means, end of 2021, 2022, 2023, which is to say the period of the pandemic where we were starting to reemerge. I've been calling it the thaw, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. I don't want to say it's over, but the moments where we started to re-engage with social stuff and
Mm-hmm.
um start doing stuff again.
Yeah.
And for me that time, the truth is, like, the pandemic itself, the lockdown itself was not that difficult for me in regards to the isolation and stuff. Like, I'm quite an introverted person, and it was at that point in 2020 that I started my own farm, kind of because of the pandemic. I just put my nose down and worked. That was my kind of coping thing. And I also, finished recording the record, and I did a lot in that time.
Right.
And so I didn't necessarily suffer directly at the hands of that isolation. But what I realized did happen during the thaw for me is that things still felt off as I re-entered
Mm.
spaces with people. And I've boiled it down over some time to the fact that even though I was okay with the isolation, what I had to do is sort of always be putting aside a certain amount of energy to hold space for uncertainty and to hold space for
Mm.
things not working out for a while. Like, you just always had to be prepared that plans would get canceled, or that
Mm.
some big thing you were planning would get shut down or whatever. And I continued to hold space for that for a long time. And what it meant is that the joy that I was trying to cultivate when I was engaging in things wasn't quite as strong as it was before the pandemic.
Mm.
It's not to say I wasn't trying to feel
Sure.
that joy and that excitement and these other feelings. It was just they didn't quite feel as strong as before. And to
Right.
me, that feels like what it was, is that I had, like, banked away a certain amount of energy that was taking away from that joy towards just in case it doesn't work out. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Right.
And
Mm.
so these songs, Kindergarten Heart, namely the title track, was sort of this exercise for me in trying to tap back into the kind of blissful, uninhibited joy that I would have felt in childhood. Like, okay, when was I the most, gleefully joyful? Let me try to tap back into that and let that inform the
Mm.
present. Let me try to remember what it is to feel joy to its fullest. Because the truth is, it's not just the pandemic that caused me to put that energy aside. Being
Right.
an adult, the stresses of adulthood, perfectionism, all these sort of like adult, I guess, inhibitions that you accumulate over time, they pull from that drain. And so yeah, this Kindergarten Heart specifically was an exercise in looking back at those moments, and that song is sort of meant to be this playful attempt at me literally trying to dive back in, like time travel into the brain of like my kindergarten 5-year-old self. So that's that song structurally. The verses kind of are building momentum, and then that final chorus where it shifts gears into this like sing along, very easy melody is meant to represent what it would be like were I to actually be successful and slip into my 5-year-old brain. And so that was sort of the impetus of the rest of the songs. They don't all necessarily dive into childhood wonder in the way that Kindergarten Heart does, but they do deal with memory, and they do deal, some of them, the first half of the album is meant to be more active and a bit more leaning into that aesthetic of childlike wonder and excitement and joy. And the second half is meant to be more from a nostalgic perspective, a bit more like passive and pensive, still hopeful, but in a bit more of an observational standpoint. So memory in general. Yeah.
I love that, those two positions of totally into it as a 5-year-old and then kind of reflecting on it a little bit, all in one package, which is really cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a real treat. I love your story. It's really quite fascinating.
Thank you.
What's 2024 holding for you? What's this year going to entail for you and your music and your trajectory?
So we are going into pre-prod for the live show on Monday. So this coming week. And then the week after that, we head down to South by Southwest with the band. Cool. Very excited for that. The music, but also the sunshine. I gotta admit, that's what's pulling me at this point. And then after that, we're doing a lot of Quebec shows. We have our album launch show on the 4th of April at Le Ministère in Montreal, but then also quite a few just kind of outside of Montreal and other parts of Quebec. And we've got some fun other Canadian shows coming up in the summer. I can't say at this point what they are because not everything has been confirmed, but shows are coming up. And yeah, shows. That's the plan.
And you're still finding time, the slivers to still write songs and are you looking to that next record as you're in this phase of kind of releasing this second one?
Yeah, always. I've always got them on the go. It's how I fill my little free moments. So there's some ideas piling up, and I'll take some concentrated time to flush them out and figure out where I want the next work to go. But yeah, always looking for the next thing.
Well, good luck in your voyage south. I think it's in Austin,
yeah, exactly.
Beautiful city. You'll feel the warmth, that's for sure. I've been there many times, and it's just a great city. And I wish you all the best too in this record. I've been really enjoying it. I hope to catch you. I mean, this is kind of good because you're de chez nous, que je peux venir voir en spectacle. So I'll look to come and catch a show.
Yeah, of course.
And take care of yourself and keep on writing. And thanks so much again for hopping on here today.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks.
December in the silver morning silence. I remember there's a gentler living that I once knew. Call me up and call me It's all that I can do to be bolder in my smolder in you. And I wanna be there, drifting off, all worries lost to salty air. And I wanna be there, rolling soft across the water, calm and fair. Call me up and call me over to offer arms and ears and shoulders as the days, space and light calls draw us closer. I get older like you. Time has tried and called a storm true. Still I'm more a child when I am with you. We've seen skies of little fires, of gray, of clear blue. Oh, the home in me is home in you too. And I wanna be there, drifting off, all worries lost to salty air. And I wanna be there, rolling soft across the